Okay, so how many times have you heard these words like strategy and innovation?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought like, well, that's great, if you're some big, huge company, but for your, one-person shop or your small team,
Right.
like that's not really for you.
Yeah.
You're not alone if you've had those thoughts.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into some of the reasons why that's actually not true.
Yeah.
The myths that might be holding you back from transforming your business. We have actually like 6 big myths that we're going to bust today.
I love myth busting.
It's fun.
And I think what's fascinating is that a lot of entrepreneurs have these myths and they don't even realize they're myths.
Right.
They just kind of accept them as reality.
Yeah.
So let's start with that first one, the idea that strategy is only for large corporations.
It's very easy to think, well, I'm just a one-person show,
Right.
Or I'm a small team. We can just kind of wing it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, is that really true?
That's a great question. Think about it. Even if you're sailing solo, you still need a compass to get where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
And strategy is that compass for your business.
Yeah.
It's helping you make intentional choices. And in some ways, when you're small and you're nimble, you need it even more.
So what would you say to somebody who's like really overwhelmed by just the thought of like, oh my gosh, strategy, like, where do I even begin?
It's so overwhelming, just the word.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that they have to have this elaborate strategy document from day one.
Okay.
So start small.
Okay.
And one of the simplest ways is just to get clear on like your why, the core purpose of your business.
Got it.
Then look at your strength. What do you do better than anyone else? That's your how to win.
Okay.
And then who are you serving?
Okay.
That's your where to play.
I like that.
You've got a simple framework that's not filled with all this jargon and MBA speak.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to get caught up in the jargon. So it really is about clarity more than like complexity.
100%.
So like we've kind of like touched on this fear thing a little bit.
Yes.
But I think there's a lot of people who are just like paralyzed by the idea of making the wrong strategic choice.
Of course. And that's a real fear that a lot of entrepreneurs have.
Right.
But here's the thing. Inaction is also a choice.
That is so true.
And oftentimes it's actually the riskier choice.
Yeah.
I had a client a few years ago. She owned a small bookstore and she was terrified to invest in online sales because she thought it was going to alienate her loyal local customers.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was her sales dwindled as more and more people shopped online.
Right.
And she ended up having to close her doors a few years later.
Wow.
A simple strategic shift early on could have saved her business.
Wow. That's a very real world example.
Yeah.
And so it highlights how avoiding strategy actually can lead to
Totally.
bigger problems down the line.
Huge bigger problems.
Yeah. Okay, so
Myth bust.
myth 1 busted, officially. But okay, what about this feeling that strategy is just too complicated to implement?
Right? It feels very MBA-ish.
It does.
All those frameworks. And you're like,
Yeah.
do I really need all that?
Yeah.
And the truth is a lot of those frameworks are just fancy ways of saying make deliberate choices,
Right.
Yeah. So don't get bogged down by the jargon. A simple tool like a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats can be incredibly powerful.
Okay.
I worked with a small bakery a couple of years ago, and we used a SWOT analysis to help them identify their unique selling proposition, which was their gluten-free offerings.
Okay.
And by focusing on that niche, they were able to really stand out in a crowded market.
So it's about applying those frameworks in a strategic way that makes sense for your business.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, so even a simple framework applied strategically can make a big difference.
Huge.
Okay, so that kind of leads us into another very common misconception, that innovation is only for tech startups.
Like, how can my little pottery studio
Right.
possibly innovate? Like
Google.
Like Google, exactly,
Right. They're very intimidating.
And that's all about perception, because innovation isn't about inventing the next iPhone.
Right.
It's about finding new and better ways to do what you already do.
Okay.
So for that pottery studio, it could be as simple as offering online workshops.
Right.
Or partnering with a local cafe for a paint-your-own mug night.
I love that.
There's so many ways to innovate that don't involve having a lab and millions of dollars.
It's not about needing a lab and millions of dollars. It's about creative thinking.
Exactly.
Applied to your business as it already exists.
100%. And I had another client. He was a local furniture maker, and he was struggling to compete with big box stores.
Okay.
And so he started offering personalized engraving and custom finishes.
Oh, nice.
And suddenly he wasn't just selling furniture, he was selling experiences and stories.
Oh, that's great.
And that's innovation.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good example of how it's not about revolution. It's about relevance.
Yes.
It's about finding ways to stay ahead of the curve and meet evolving customer needs.
100%.
Even if you're in a really traditional industry, like
Yes.
furniture making.
That's right.
But I think a lot of business owners, they worry about alienating their existing customers with too much change.
Absolutely. And that's a valid concern. But the alternative is stagnation.
Right.
Remember Blockbuster Video?
Oh, yeah.
They resisted online streaming because they assumed their customers would always prefer physical rentals.
Right.
We all know how that turned out.
Yeah, we do.
And so even small changes implemented strategically can make a big difference.
Okay. 3 myths down. Feeling empowered.
Yes.
Okay. What about this myth that strategy and innovation are only about growth?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of us are like, I don't want to be the next Amazon.
Right.
I just want to run my cozy little bookstore, you know?
And that's totally fine. And I think when we think about growth, it's not always about size.
Right.
It's about creating something sustainable and valuable.
Okay.
So for that bookstore owner, it could be about cultivating a loyal community of readers through book clubs or author events. That's growth too.
So growth can be about deepening relationships.
Exactly.
Refining your offering. Building a brand that really resonates with your audience.
Yes.
It's not just about revenue. It's about long-term value.
Long-term value. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I worked with a small family-owned Italian restaurant a few years ago, and they were chasing all the latest food trends, trying to attract new customers, and in the process, their food quality suffered, and their loyal customers stopped coming.
Yeah.
So we refocused their strategy on what they did best, traditional, authentic Italian recipes.
Okay.
Their loyal customers came back, word of mouth spread, and they ended up with a longer wait list than ever before.
That's great.
And they were happier, too.
And they were happier.
Because they were doing what they loved.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great reminder that sometimes the best growth strategy is to focus on what makes you unique.
Absolutely.
Play to your strengths.
Yeah.
Build on your existing foundation.
Love it.
And not necessarily try to be everything to everyone.
Right. You don't have to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
You can just be the best you go.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
You got it.
Yeah, it's about staying true to that vision and letting that guide your growth rather than, you know, chasing all the fleeting trends.
Exactly.
But speaker of limitations, that brings us to another big myth. The idea that strategy and innovation require a large budget.
Oh, my gosh. Yes.
I'm sure you felt that one.
Oh, absolutely.
At some point.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I need to innovate.
Right.
Let me go hire a team of scientists and get a lab and
Exactly.
we need
Millions of dollars.
millions of dollars. Yeah.
But is that really the case?
Not at all.
Okay.
In fact, I would argue that a constrained budget can actually fuel innovation
Interesting.
because it forces you to be resourceful
Right.
and think outside the box.
Yeah.
I had a client a few years ago. She owned a small clothing boutique.
Okay.
And she couldn't afford to do these big, expensive marketing campaigns.
Right.
So she partnered with local influencers for Instagram takeovers.
Oh, it's smart.
She offered styling sessions in her boutique.
Great idea.
And she was able to generate so much buzz and build a loyal following,
Okay.
all on a shoestring budget.
So it's about leveraging creativity and partnerships.
Exactly.
Rather than just thinking like, oh, I need to throw money at this problem.
Right. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah. And I think especially today, there are so many incredible
Yes.
free and low-cost tools available.
Yes.
You know, you can do so much with social media platforms
Totally.
and all these online marketing resources. So you really don't have to break the bank to start innovating.
You don't.
Okay, so it's not about being held back by limited resources. It's about seeing those limitations as opportunities
As a catalyst.
to be creative.
Yes.
Okay, myth number 5, officially debunked. But there's one more we need to tackle, and this is the idea that strategy is a one-time activity.
Ah, yes. The dusty business plan.
Yeah.
Sitting on the shelf.
Yeah.
This is a big one, and this is a misconception that can really stifle transformation because the business landscape is constantly changing.
Right.
Customer preferences evolve, new competitors emerge, the unexpected happens. Hello, global pandemic.
Yeah, nobody saw that one coming.
Right, exactly. And so your strategy needs to be just as dynamic.
So it's not about creating a static document. It's about embracing change.
Yes.
And adapting as you go.
It's a living document, not a museum piece.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah, so it requires constant tweaking adjusting, and sometimes even like a complete overhaul.
100%. I was working with a local bookstore, and when they first opened, they focused on rare and collectible books.
Oh, okay.
But as the market shifted,
Right.
they realized they needed to expand their offerings to include more contemporary titles.
Got it.
And they even added a cafe to create more of a community space.
Okay.
And that strategic pivot really saved their business.
Yeah, and I think that highlights how staying attuned to market changes
Absolutely.
and customer feedback is so crucial
It's essential
for long-term success.
Yes.
It's about being willing to kind of pivot and adapt, even if it means deviating from your original plan.
Right. Sometimes you have to throw the plan out the window
Right.
and just go with what's working.
Yeah, and I think that could be really scary for some people.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for entrepreneurs who are very attached to their vision.
Right?
But sometimes you have to let go of that
Right.
a little bit and trust your gut.
Trust your gut. Okay. So how can business owners make strategy an ongoing part of their routine without feeling overwhelmed?
That's a great question, and I think it's about building in checkpoints
Okay.
for reflection and adjustment.
Okay.
So don't wait for a crisis to force your hand.
Yeah.
Schedule quarterly strategy reviews,
Okay.
even if it's just for an hour.
Right.
Block out the time in your calendar.
Yeah.
Look at your data, what's working, what's not.
Okay.
Are your target customers still the same?
Right.
Has your competitive landscape changed?
Yeah.
These simple check-ins can prevent major course corrections down the line.
So it's almost like taking your business in
Yes.
for like regular tune-ups
Exactly.
instead of waiting for the engine to blow up.
Love it.
So small, consistent adjustments can make a big difference
Huge.
over time.
Yes. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins along the way.
That's a good point.
Transforming your business isn't about reaching a finish line.
Right.
It's about constantly evolving and improving.
It's a journey.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Okay, we've officially busted all 6 myths. I'm feeling energized and ready to take on the world. But before we wrap up, I have a feeling you have some parting wisdom for our listener.
I always do.
What's the one thing you want them to take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is that strategy and innovation aren't just buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
They're not reserved for the elite few.
Right.
They're tools.
Yeah.
Powerful tools that can help you transform your business no matter how big or small.
Yeah.
No matter what industry you're in.
Right.
So embrace the journey.
Yeah.
Stay curious.
Mm.
And don't let fear hold you back.
I love that. What's really resonating with me is just this feeling of empowerment.
Yeah.
Like we've spent this whole episode debunking all these myths that make strategy and innovation seem really intimidating and unattainable.
Right.
But they're really not,
I know.
if you're willing to embrace them.
Exactly. And that's the key takeaway that I hope listeners walk away with.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need an MBA.
Right.
You don't need $1 million budget. Yeah.
You can start transforming your business today.
So what's one thing that our listeners can do today to kind of move from myth-busting to action-taking?
Ooh, I love that.
Like, what's a simple starting point?
Okay, so one of the simplest things I always encourage my clients to do is just ask themselves this one question.
Okay.
What's one thing I could change or improve in my business that would make a real difference?
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be this big, massive thing.
Right.
It could be something as simple as revamping your website,
Right.
trying a new marketing channel, or even just having a conversation with your most loyal customers
Okay.
to get their feedback.
Yeah. So it's about identifying one area where you can kind of experiment, test, and learn.
Exactly. And once you start seeing those small wins,
Right.
it creates momentum.
Yeah.
It builds your confidence, and it encourages you to keep pushing forward.
And it's about proving those myths wrong through action,
Yes.
not just words.
Love it.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
I'm feeling very inspired.
I'm so glad.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we sign off?
Yes. The business world is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
So the only way to stay ahead of the curve is to embrace continuous learning and adaptation. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Right.
Experiment with new ideas.
Yeah.
And never stop seeking ways to improve.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
So to all our listeners out there who are ready to ditch those myths and embark on this journey of transformation,
Yes.
remember, you have the power to build a thriving, sustainable business.
Absolutely.
Embrace strategy.
Yes.
Embrace innovation.
Love it.
And never stop believing in your potential.
Never.
And if you need a little help along the way, don't hesitate to reach out to fix your struggling business. reach out to Acquisition Pro. And remember, Acquisition Pro is the place to go for strategy and innovation.